Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. So, is he a K-pop idol or is he a serial killer? This not so bad looking 31-year-old guy has been the dominant news item this week in Korea after he had been questioned and investigated over how many bodies, because he has admitted to at least two bodies. And how did this all come about? Over the holidays, may I add, his girlfriend went looking for some cat food in the closet and got a bigger surprise, which was she found the taxi driver. Now, the big debate in the media has been about whether we can show any picture of his face, because in Korea, the accused has to approve. They have photo rights. They have, right of first refusal over what image goes out there, and he chose his driver's license photo. And a lot of people here in Korea are saying, like, give us the real photo, give us the real photo. And I want to unpack that because I think there are several types of forces at play there, but one that concerns me the most is the one that's most unspoken, so we're going to speak about it over here on the Seoulite. And that's essentially, I think people want to see a monster in the face and be able to be like, oh, okay, well, I would know, to be careful around somebody who looks like that. But the fact is, this guy looked not only normal, but probably on the more good-looking scale of, what kind of looks you can be blessed with. And so that is not the face of the quote-unquote killer, but it is. And speaking of a killer face, not to downplay the story that we're about to get into, but if you want to have some killer beauty, sustainable beauty, just buy one piece of skincare technology and use it over and over and over. Are you going to buy some expensive retinol eye cream, face cream, and not even know if it works? Or do you want high quality Korean LED technology, dual wavelengths, working on many different angles of your skin to make it brighter and tighter and more glowing? That's gonna be a killer face. So we have coupon code Seoulite TV. That'll get you the best deal at the moment. Whatever the promotion happens to be, Seoulite TV coupon codes will be the best. And we lower the prices because, yes, I do believe inflation has peaked, so might as well lead the charge, lead by example. Found some ways to cut our shipping costs, so I wanted to pass that along to you. So all that coming up. Stay tuned. Okay, so this guy, we have some pictures. We have some of his marriage pictures. He does not look like a monster killer, but he does look like a serial killer, because those serial killers, even I believe they said, who was it, Jeffrey Dahmer or the other, like many different serial killers in the United States, they were able to seduce women because they were actually quite good looking. And so this whole obsession here in Korea about being able to tell everything based on how you look, I think does not work when it really matters. When you're face to face with the serial killer, you better believe serial killers and psychopaths are gonna look good. They're not gonna look like a hot mess, but if you do know how to look, I think then oh, something off about this person. But for the people who only rely on oh my God, I have to believe that the world only can give me information that I can understand in the sense of, if they look angelic, then they must be an angel. Serial killers, psychopaths are all trying to look like angels to take advantage of that very fact of many people just judge a book by its cover, and honey, if you don't read it, you're gonna get the book slammed in your face, and maybe even more. So who is this guy? 31-year-old Ki-young. He was married twice, and that's not really the important part, but people kept talking about that as well. But you know, there is a parallel to our Psycho River killer. Wasn't she married twice? There's a parallel to a lot of the other stories that we've been talking about on this channel about the profile of these psychopathic killers. And they're actually, you know, trying to put down a psychopath test on this guy. So let's work backwards in chronological order of what's happening. So he is in police custody, thank goodness, so you don't have to worry. Part of the reason why everybody wanted to see his face is because they were like, well, if there are other witnesses that need to come forward, they need to know what he really looks like, not just how he looked like on his driver's license photo from like 10 years ago. And they have been questioning him because they don't believe the taxi driver is the only one. And he did confess to another one. And we're going to go back to that when we get to it in chronological order. And so how this taxi driver situation happened was in December, so last month, a few weeks ago, he had gotten into a car accident with a taxi driver. Apparently, he had been drinking, so he did not want to get another DUI because I think his license had already been suspended. And so he said to the taxi driver, okay, well, let's just, you know, make an arrangement between us. I'll give you some cash to pay for the repair expenses and for your trouble. And that is kind of a thing that is accepted here in Korea as a practice. Like if you don't want to get the insurance involved or the police involved, you can, you know, negotiate a payment with the person that, you know, you got into an accident with. But he said, I don't have cash here. I have cash at my house. And so they drove to his house. They have the footage of him entering the elevator to his house with the taxi driver. 20 minutes later, they have footage of this 31-year-old serial killer leaving the elevator by himself. So it didn't even take 20 minutes. Why was he going out 20 minutes later? To get rid of the taxi car, like he to take it away. This guy was able to do it in 20 minutes. So police have been questioning him, and we have to take what he says, the serial killer statements, with a grain of salt. But according to him, he said that they got up to his place and they started arguing about the amount. And apparently he didn't even have any cash. And then so I guess that's what happened. He admitted, he said, okay, well, yeah. Well, then they found the body. But that was like December 20th. And then on December 25th, when he was out of the house, his girlfriend, who was living there, not the one that went to a different dimension. This is a current. I told you he was not that bad looking. I mean, he's getting girlfriends this way and that way. So, the girlfriend was looking for some cat food, and she noticed a closet that had its handles tied with a rope. I mean, in a horror movie, isn't that the first thing? Don't open that closet. Well, she had to open the closet because I guess the cat was really hungry. And so instead of finding cat food, she found the corpse of the taxi driver. And so this has been like 5 days. I'm like, what the? This is the weirdest thing. And apparently the cleaning lady even came in, you know, in between the December 20th and December 25th. And then neighbors said that, you know, usually he was like smoking all the time, and the scent of cigarettes would go in between floors through the bathroom vent. But oddly, instead of cigarettes, they started smelling this like artificial rose type of air freshener. And there was like, oh, maybe he was trying to cover up the stench of a corpse. And so the girlfriend freaked out, and then she called the police, and that is how we know about this right now. That is how he is being questioned, and through the questioning, that is how we know what happened to the owner of that house. That house that he's living in was the house of his like 50-year-old girlfriend. Over the summer, he admitted in the questioning this week, he said, oh, yes, there was another person. Because obviously they had some questions because he was living in somebody else's house and probably her belongings were there. Like, you can start to do the criminal forensics and be like, why are you living in this house? What happened to this woman who owns this house? And he said like, oh, she was my girlfriend. And yes, I admit we had a fight. And then he offed her, and then he said he threw her in the river. So they live in Paju, so it's like Gyeonggi-do, it's the north. It's like one of the last major metropolitan areas before you get to North Korea, and it's still considered part of the Seoul greater region. And there's a river over there, and he said that he threw her into the river. So then they started dragging the river. It's still winter time right now, so that is not an easy feat. Remember, even with the SJM case, Han River right in the middle in April, they couldn't find him, but then boom, they found him. Again, what? It always the river, man. Be careful of that river. And so then they couldn't find him, and then they brought him in for questioning again. And he said, he changed the story. He said, oh, no, instead of throwing her in the river, I buried her next to the river. They're trying to dig through this icy mud, and then they're like, okay, you dude, come down to the river and show exactly where you buried her. And then he went there, and police were escorting him, and the media photographers were able to try to get a clearer image of his face, because people are really upset by these days, people who commit crimes and are allowed to hide their identity. And so they were able to get some other shots of his face. And then, of course, the internet has found, the wedding photos, and like, I think this is the monster face that people want to see, is like when he was in the army, that photo, and other video has surfaced, CCTV. So we'll leave it there about like, so we have the taxi driver that was reported by the girlfriend and they found in the closet. And then we have, under his own admission, the death of his 50-year-old girlfriend from the summertime, whose house he's still living in. They couldn't find the body, but he admitted to it. Now, in terms of like what he looks like, of course, his styles can change, and his current style is more of like, I believe, longer hair, maybe a perm, and then he had glasses on, because we also did see this was just a few days after the taxi driver incident. He wanted to go out for dinner, but he had nobody to go out with, because I guess nobody wants to eat with a serial killer. So we have CCTV footage of him at a Korean barbecue restaurant, and he comes in with a group of guys, and then you're like, oh, well, maybe those are his friends. Turns out they didn't even know him. He went to a restaurant next door and just, I guess, started talking to these guys and said like, hey, I'll buy you alcohol and barbecue. And I mean, most people would be like, that is really weird. But then he'd just go around and say like, oh, I'm so rich because like I have like inherited buildings and stuff like that. And so he would make so that's one indicator, grandiosity. He would try to pretend that he was like some rich guy, especially also to get the girls. But then I guess it works to even get the guys. But in Korea, I could sort of understand like, okay, if the guys were drunk and then they kind of see this, kind of crazy guy was willing to just like throw money, okay, fine, just, buy us something. Because in Korea still, like, you can still bribe people of a good piece of meat grilling on a hot plate. And because, the meat prices are a lot more expensive here in Korea, so people can be swayed by that. So it is weird that these guys said yes, but on the other hand, like, I think Korean people also can kind of see like, okay, well, if you're able to be led that way, barbecue, fine. No boobs, fine. Barbecue it is. And so, because I think it's on the same, like, Neanderthal level. And then so they were eating, and then I guess they thought that it was getting a little bit weird. So they said like, okay, we need to go. And then so they left. We have the CCTV footage of him paying, and then the CCTV footage of him outside, then starting to fight with these guys. So this guy, yes, has shown that he's like grandiose, a little bit weird, lies about who he is, and then gets into fights a lot. And so on the whole, that would be more of a sociopath, because a psychopath won't tell you they're mad. Suddenly you're dead. You don't know how they found you. Suddenly you're dead. But a sociopath is the one that does get into fights and brawls. So he's probably more of a sociopath, but he is being tested whether he is a psychopath or not. But under the DSM system, which is mainly US based but Western medicine based, you can't be diagnosed as a psychopath, but the psychopath or sociopath label is a combination of two diagnosable mental disorders. One is narcissistic personality disorder. That's the whole grandiosity and creating a false image and having a lot of shame. And then what's called antisocial personality disorder. That does not mean shy. This was an old term for antisocial, which basically meant that you were breaking the law. You were anti-society or anti-law abiding. So those two together, and then depending on whether you're like crafty about it or whether you're like fist about it, is like psychopath or sociopath. So I think he's probably more of a sociopath because he can't control his emotions. And so that was brought up to the public because something about this guy, I think they keep stressing how he's only 31, he's a 31-year-old guy. I think it's a bit of an obsession with like, somebody like that can't be. Yeah, they can. And they were comparing the pictures of the Enroom case and some other people this year, these guys, where the shot, and it's not a mug shot. Like if the person doesn't want to send out their mug shot, they can choose. So they usually choose like their ID photo, and which is heavily photoshopped here in Korea, but you know, everybody looks good on their ID. So the ID photos of all those other people, and people are saying like, oh, they look so different in real life, but to me they look kind of similar, and they don't look like crazy monsters. And that's what scares people. It's just like, how am I supposed to know if a psychopath is in front of me? Well, I guess we should just take the responsibility now and be like, look, it's beyond the looks, because the looks are the first thing that these sociopaths and psychopaths will fixate on so that they can get beyond your read a book by its cover detection system. So yeah, pay attention to the actual signs. So this current girlfriend and then the girlfriend that is missing right now, the 50-year-old lady, they were both like what they called Tomies in like a nighttime establishment. And check out my, Secrets of the Room Salon Girl video. There's kind of like a different system between like if she works at the room salon or if she's kind of like this floating traveling. It's kind of like calling an Uber, but you call like a girl helper. And she basically is like, let's say you go to like a karaoke place and they don't have like, if you go to a karaoke place and there are already girls there, then most likely it's kind of like a room salon. But if it's just a karaoke place, but then they say like, oh, you call this number, and then some girl will pop up and then they kind of like sit with you and sing with you. And it's maybe not necessarily anything like, illicit, but they were kind of like in that business. So police are still looking for the body of that lady. And the police also believe there are more people because they did a blood test of the apartment and then also his car belongings. They found the DNA fragments of at least 4 people, 3 women and 1 man. And apparently the man has been confirmed to be the taxi driver, and they're trying to figure out who the other 3 are. But the other weird thing was that they found a lot of items that did not belong to him. So it looked like he was also like a shoplift, a pickpocket, or he would steal people's items. And the police were trying to track down like who were the owners of these items. They were so diligent that they found a pair of shoes, and I think they were women's shoes, and they called all of, like, I guess there's only 12 boutiques in Korea, and they asked for the customer list of who bought these shoes in Korea, and then called them and said, like, are you still alive? And then apparently all the people who, had supposedly bought those shoes were alive. And so they're trying to confirm that any item that he has belongs to somebody who is still living or not, and then to continue the investigation, because they do not believe that he only stopped at 2. It looks more like, in terms of what's the motivation, well, at least in terms of what we can see, is that a lot of these seem to have been tied to his getting money. So the police and the prosecution now are going after the charges of not just murder. If it's just murder, then you can get at least 5 years in prison to life imprisonment or the death penalty. If it's, they call it 강도 살인, if it's related to stealing and murder, then it has to be at least life imprisonment or the death penalty. So that's where he's at right now, and they're trying to see, how many. But the ones that we've seen so far was very money related. With the taxi driver, he immediately took the taxi driver's phone and reset the code, and then started texting the taxi driver's friends and family who were worried about not seeing him, saying like, oh, I'm unreachable. He started using the credit card of the taxi driver, and then, I don't even know how you do this, but I get, Korea FinTech, on his phone, on the taxi driver's phone, he was able to get like $40,000 to $50,000 in a contactless loan. He was able to get use the taxi driver's name and information and get a loan for about $40,000 to $50,000 without having to step into a bank. And so they're saying like, okay, this is definitely like a financially motivated crime. With the lady that he had lived with, they're also saying that it was financially motivated because he was using her credit cards and taking advantage of her financially. And so they're thinking that like there's got to be some more instances, because the incident with the lady ended like in the summertime, and he wasn't able to continue to use her cards because he wasn't paying them. And then this incident with the taxi driver happened December 20th. So how is he, surviving between those times? And people are thinking like he might have had this system worked out by now, where he knew what he was doing, because with the whole taxi driver thing, that seemed like a real fast 20 minutes in and out. Then boom, his phone became like a bank, and then boom, he was out on the town just like, inviting random guys to have Korean barbecue with him and paying the tab, and got a new girlfriend and bought her, they spent like $5,000 on couple rings, and then they were like, having like great luxurious staycations. See, that's the thing with the news thing in Korea. If you can tie it to things that people buy and shop and spend, then, people care. Good Lord. I'm still thinking about the whole SJM case. What I'm surprised by is the police's response to this and how diligent they were with combing through evidence, when it seems as if this guy has absolutely no connections and does not pose any kind of political or financial threat to any authorities, and so they're way going after him. Whereas in poor SJM's case, my goodness, the evidence was all around. With this guy, this 31-year-old serial killer, they investigated his shoes, Yes. They investigated his cell phone to get digital forensics. Yes. They investigated the blood stains. Yeah. So remember an SJM case? Shoes, oh, they disappeared. Phone, oh, it disappeared and then mysteriously reappeared 3 weeks later. Oh, the bloodstains all over the place? No, that's probably like a cat that was just like bleeding. I've never seen a bleeding cat in the wild. Have you? I don't even know how they came up with that excuse. So the amount of creative excuses in the SJM case compared to the actual good job it seems like they're doing in this case makes me kind of more freaked out about the police and the people behind them than this 31-year-old guy who is a horrible person, but at least it just kind of stops with him. So if you kind of, put him in jail, then it'll probably just be it. Whereas I don't know about the whole SJM situation. So that is where we're at with this case so far. And so the prosecution is collecting the evidence from the police, and they're continuing to try to figure out how many more bodies are buried or somewhere, or however he may have disposed of them, because apparently he seemed like so blasé about the taxi driver. Just put him in the closet and then go out to eat, and then have the cleaning lady come and go, and then have his girlfriend over and look for some cat food. So thank goodness for cats. If it weren't for a cat, then the girlfriend may have been the next victim, and we wouldn't even be in this situation. He would still be out on the loose. So thank goodness for cats. All right, guys. Well, what do you think? Put your comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And remember, the coupon code is there, Seoulite TV, for all your K-beauty technology needs. See you again next time. Bye-bye, guys.